In this demonstration, we're going to practice implementing a proxy server in the network configuration you see here. We have our internal network over here. It has workstation hosts that need to access hosts out on the internet. We're going to have all those requests pass through a proxy server that will sit between our internal network and our border firewall. You can configure a proxy server to do lots of different things. For our purposes, we're going to configure our proxy server to do two things. Number one, we're going to configure it to cache frequently used content. If we have multiple hosts over here that access the same content off the internet, the proxy server can just pull it out of its local cache instead of continually going out and getting the same information over and over and over. The other thing we're going to do is configure this proxy server to filter content. In other words, we want it to inspect IP packets that come back, look at the payload within those packets, and see whether or not it meets our organization's security policy. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm on a workstation that's on that internal network, and I'm going to connect to the configuration interface of our proxy server. We do that in a web browser. We need to go to the URL untangle.corpnet.xyz. We'll need to log in. My credentials are already there. After we log in, we're brought to the dashboard where we can see several widgets that are useful. This server is actually an appliance that can perform the functions of a proxy server or do a lot of other things. You can load the various applications you want to implement on it. For now, we're just going to focus on the proxy server component. The first thing we want to do is install web cache on this server. This is an app that we must install, and this appliance makes it very easy to do. We need to go up to the app selection and then select Install Apps. Now let's select Web Cache down here. This will cache frequently used content from the internet locally on the proxy server. So let's hit that to install it. Let's go back to the apps page. Let's click on Web Cache to get to the settings. We need to enable it by clicking here. By default, it's going to cache pretty much everything. The status over here shows that nothing's been cached yet because we haven't put any traffic through it. But as we do, these statistics will increment. Notice down here, it tells us that if the content that's stored in this cache becomes corrupt, old, or otherwise unusable, then we can come down here and clear the cache. It warns us that if we do this, we're actually going to kill any existing web sessions that are going on, and they want us to mark that we understand that before we clear it. We're not going to worry about that right now, but do be aware that that option's available. There's another option called Cache Bypass. You can add websites you want internal hosts to be able to access directly off of the internet and not look inside the cache on the proxy server for that content. You can notice here that one website has been added to our cache bypass by default, maps.google.com. If we want to add additional sites, we click the Add button. I'm not going to add anything today, but this is where you do it. Let's return back to the status page. As a reminder, the button turns green when it's enabled. At this point, we know that it's caching content from the internet. We've taken care of our first task. Now, let's look at how we filter content. The second task we want this proxy server to perform is controlling access to content on the internet. In order to do this, we need to install a web filtering app on this server. We need to return back to our apps page and once again go to Install Apps. We select Web Filter, wait for it to install, and then return back to the apps page. Let's go ahead and click on Web Filter to configure it. Right away, we see that it's enabled by default. I'll just leave that alone for now. Notice here on the Block Categories tab, we have dozens of different categories of websites that we can block, and we can decide one of two things with each category of sites. Do we want to block it or just flag it? If you flag it, access will be allowed, but an entry will be created in log files for the administrator to look at. If you block it, then it is, of course, blocked if the end user tries to go to that site. In our organization, we don't want users to be able to use anonymizers. By default, this option is already checked. We don't want them to access dating sites. We're also going to block gambling and gaming websites. Deciding what to block really depends on your organization. In a high school district that had a certified nursing program or a criminal justice program, many of the sites necessary for those classes wouldn't be accessible because they fall under one of the categories I blocked. We'd have to whitelist them or add them to the past sites list. Let's apply these changes and then look at allowing and blocking certain sites. There may be certain sites that you want blocked that don't fit in one of these categories. If that's the case, you can go to Block Sites and then manually add those sites. For example, let's say we need to block access to badsite.com. Let's go ahead and add that. Now it's added to our server's blocked sites list. Let's save the settings. Be aware that there may be specific sites that don't fall within one of the categories we've blocked, say social media. Maybe we have an organization that uses Twitter for announcements, but we want other social media blocked. If this is the case, we can go to past sites and add it there. When we do, it'll allow access through the server to a site that is technically blocked by the blocked categories. We can also grant specific clients on the private network access through the server to bypass our blocked categories. To do that, we go to the Past Clients tab. For example, we could add a host that has an IP address of 192.168.0.100, and we will allow that host to pass through the proxy server without being filtered. We'll apply our changes. I want to block social media sites, so I'm going to go back to categories. I'll scroll down here and look for social networking. I'm going to block that one also. Let's go ahead and test whether or not our proxy server is doing what it's supposed to do. Let's go over here and open up a new tab. Let's just search for online gaming sites. Let's pick this link from the list and try to go to the URL. It's blocked, so that's exactly what we want. Let's try accessing the site that we added to our allowed site list, but the category was blocked, which was twitter.com. And as you can see, we're allowed through the server to that site. Now let's try another social media site, instagram.com. We can see that this site is blocked because it falls under the umbrella of social networking. That's it for this demonstration. In this demo, we looked at configuring a proxy server. First, we configured the proxy server to cache web content, and then we configured it to filter web content.